Well, Psalm 100. Believe it or not, we're ready for verse 4. But we have to think of it in context. So I'm going to read from the beginning. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. Oh, and by the way, one of the things that means is I'm not, neither are you. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are the people, we are his people, the sheep of his pasture. When I talked about it last time, how dumb sheep are. Well, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just pointing back at myself. I'm a sheep. Then he goes on in verse 4. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. Well, all right. First of all, enter his gates with thanksgiving. What that for us today as Gentiles, post destruction of the temple, and on this side of the cross, I'm not sure that we get the full implication of entering his gates. You probably already know this, but the psalmist is talking about the gates into the city and then into the temple. The center for the ancient Jew, especially for this psalmist, the center of the universe was the temple, was the dwelling of the glory and majesty of God. Well, there is no temple anymore, and so there's no gate. There's no gate to enter, except, well, there's a whole bunch of ways to look at this. Number one, Paul writes that our body, we are the temple of God. We are now the physical location for the glory of God. That's a high honor. And I would even say a pretty strong responsibility. We are the dwelling of God. And it's not, even in the days of the Old Testament, the temple was not the only dwelling place of God. The Jews weren't like their pagan neighbors who had a whole big splay of gods of location. So that there was a god of the hills, a god of the valleys, there was a god of the plains, there was a god of the waters. There was a god for every location. the Jews were not, that's not where they were. But they did believe that the mercy seat, a piece of furniture in the temple, was the physical location where the glory of God dwelt. This did not, for them, diminish the fact that his presence was everywhere. It's a little bit of a conundrum, but so what about us? If my body is the temple of God, there are a few things that we seldom preach about, teach about, hear about in the church today. Anyway, in my experience, I think the stewardship of my body, my health, is part of the whole stewardship of my whole life. And because my body is the temple, of the Lord, I want to take appropriate care of it. Now, I know I'm, again, running down a bunny trail. I've thought recently I could probably change the title of what I do to Bunny Trails with Stevie Boy. Here's a bunny trail worth taking, though. Most of us could be more intentional about the stewardship of our body and our health. Now, there are people, I have friends, whose, because of illnesses that they experience, stewarding their health means doing the best they can with, for some of them, a horrible situation where their body is in constant revolt, where it isn't a matter of their intention. Their intention can't make the disease go away. What do you do with that? Well, I know this sounds kind of trite, but you do the best you can with it. In dependence on God's grace and mercy, but you can't, there's some things you can't just change by an act of your will. No, that won't make the disease go away. I wish it were different. I wish there was a way to access, without question and without failing, the healing power of Christ and make the disease go away. There are people who, for reasons I don't fully yet understand, and I probably won't until I get to heaven, there are people who God's design is that they will be healed, and others who I think have fundamentally the same kind of faith who are not healed. Can't explain it. All right. If you are one of those people, you didn't ask for my advice, but my thought is, sometimes my experience is, and I even, when I was recovering from my heart attack, was a little bit in this category, not nearly like others who have this very long-standing, protracted season of serious illnesses, but don't blame yourself. Okay, if I did something to bring this on, I got to confess it, I got to admit it, I've got to acknowledge it, but don't stay there. It's like, how many times do I have to be spanked for the offense before it counts? Okay. Second thing, release yourself from the guilt that sometimes is projected by the people around you and in your life, that you would be better if you just wanted to be better more. That's probably not the case. You're not guilty of anything. What has happened is you have found yourself in a position where the challenges of your life today, right now, are overwhelming. This is, gosh, it sounds so hollow, but it's all I know. Trust God and do what's next. What's next is probably not going to be anything dramatic or anything big. It may only be go from here to there. Trust God and do what's next. Don't be wrapped up in what you can't do. And that list is big. Focus on what you can do. Small list, but way more important than what you can't do. Okay, so for the rest of us, steward our health, and that is not, that's not a big old difficult thing. I mean, you don't have to go spend hundreds of dollars on memberships at health clubs. You probably already know this. For crying out loud, research continues to bear out that walking is as good as anything for nurturing your health. Okay. Pay attention to your diet. I know what it's like to struggle with a weight issue. So I'm not throwing rocks at people who are overweight. But I am saying most of us who have been, I still have somewhere between 5 and 10 pounds that I want to shed. And the reason is I don't want to have to carry around that weight. I will literally lengthen my life by losing that weight, and I'm in for that. But that won't happen accidentally. It requires discipline and effort and intention. So that's just one aspect. But many Christians, I'd even say most Christians, don't give any serious thought to the habits, the health habits, or the unhealthy habits that we have. All right, enter his gates with thanksgiving. I don't know how we will enter his gates other than in a very symbolic kind of way, because for the Jew, the ancient Jew in the day of this psalmist, you entered God's presence when you entered the temple. And I said it before, but I'll say it again. This did not mean that they didn't believe in God's, what theologians call omnipresence, where he is present everywhere, all at the same time. But they did view that you entered his presence in a unique and sacred way when you entered the temple. Okay. We don't have a temple other than our own body. But are there not times when we enter his presence in unique and even sacred ways? I think there are. I want to do that every day. And I'll be honest with you, I do that in my quiet time, all right? I read scripture, I pray, I ponder, and I don't do this I try not to do this in a vacuum. I'll have to admit to you that every day, it's not that every time I crack open the Bible, I just sense God's divine presence. I wish. I mean, there's some days, the best I can say is, God, I was here, I am here. So there we go. No voices, no big message. But every time we enter that gate, let's do it with thanksgiving in our hearts. I told you I'm taking the challenge from our church, the Crossing here in Las Vegas, to keep a 30-day gratitude journal. Well, seems like it would be easy. Well, it is once you get started, but getting started is hard. I want to just challenge you today that every day, enter his gates and do it with gratitude. Well, time's up. Come back to this next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.